The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson. Elisabeth-Charlotte, Duchess of Orléans, was a remarkable woman whose life spanned the intricate corridors of European aristocracy, marked by political alliances, personal turmoil, and unflinching independence. Born into a family of high rank, yet shaped by early family strife, Elisabeth-Charlotte carved a distinct place for herself in the annals of history through her extraordinary letters, offering unparalleled insight into the royal courts of 17th century Europe. From her early days in Heidelberg to her turbulent marriage to Philippe I, Duke of Orléans, and her complex relationship with the French monarchy, Elisabeth-Charlotte's life was one of both personal and political intrigue. Her candid, biting letters, which range from humorous observations to sharp critiques of court life, continue to reveal the depth of her character, offering us a rare window into the world of Louis XIV's France and the tumultuous years of the Renaissance. Elisabeth-Charlotte, Duchess of Orléans, was born on the 27th of May, 1652, to Charles Louis, Count Palatine, and Charlotte of Hesse-Kassel. Raised under the guidance of her aunt, Duchess Sophie of Hanover, Electress of Hanover, and mother of King George I, she was granted a distinguished upbringing that would shape her remarkable character. Elizabeth was the granddaughter of Frederick V and Elizabeth Stuart of England, and great-grandmother of Marie Antoinette. Over the course of her life, she composed an extraordinary 60,000 letters, far surpassing Voltaire, who wrote approximately 20,000, corresponding with the royal courts of Prussia, England, Sweden, Denmark, Spain, and Sicily. Her letters also reached nearly every princely court in Germany, as well as the ducal courts of Lorraine, Savoy, and Modena, underscoring her significant involvement in European affairs. In her correspondence, Elizabeth frequently painted vivid images of her childhood, climbing trees, running with the wind, and imagining herself as a leaf carried by the breeze. She often wished that she had been born a boy, longing for the freedoms that she believed would have been afforded to her. However, behind the joy of her early years lay the turbulence of her family life. Her parents' marriage ended in legal separation while she was still a child, and her father remarried Louise von Degenfeld, a former lady-in-waiting to her mother. Despite the complexities of their relationship, Elizabeth and Louise remained close friends throughout their lives, exchanging letters at least once a week, some stretching to 20 pages. With her family life in upheaval, Elizabeth's upbringing was entrusted to her aunt, Duchess Sophie of Brunswick-Lüneburg, Electress of Hanover and mother of King George I, who provided her with a refined and intellectually stimulating education. In 1663, Elizabeth was brought back to Heidelberg by her father to receive a courtly education suited to a young lady of her rank. Her studies included Bible lessons, needlework, and dance, while her leisure activities ranged from badminton to billiards. Her father and stepmother would go on to have 13 more children, though many did not survive infancy. Among those who did, Elizabeth maintained a close correspondence with her sisters, Countesses Louise and Amalie, as well as her brother Raugraf, Charles Louis. In 1671, Elizabeth was married to Philippe I, Duke of Orléans, the widowed younger brother of King Louis XIV. The marriage was politically arranged by her father in a bid to protect his lands from French expansion, an effort that would prove futile within a decade. Elizabeth had little to say in the arrangement, and she faced her new life with resignation. As she left her beloved homeland, she did so in tears, lamenting the loss of what she felt was a simpler, more sincere life. She felt solace in her memories of Germany, often expressing her longing for its unpretentious lifestyle and hearty cuisine, which she preferred over the more refined, extravagant fare of the French court. Elizabeth was far from fond of her new husband. Felipe led a hedonistic life of excess, squandering vast fortunes on lovers, favorites, and endless nights of card-playing. Unlike her strained marriage, Elizabeth's relationship with the French king was one of genuine warmth and mutual admiration. They shared a deep love for theater and opera, often attending performances together, seated side by side. Hunting was another shared passion, and the two could often be seen riding through the royal grounds either on horseback or in carriage, enjoying each other's company. Elizabeth and Felipe had a daughter and 2 sons, though their eldest child died young. Once the Duke had fulfilled his dynastic duties, he withdrew from their marital bed, a move Elizabeth was relieved by, as she had little fondness for the, quote, work of having babies, end quote. However, her relief was short-lived. From that point onward, Felipe either ignored her or made her life more difficult. To compound matters, his entourage of favorites began spreading malicious lies about her, further straining their already fragile marriage. With the king unwillingly to intervene or take sides, Elizabeth found herself caught in a web of intrigue that she was left to navigate alone. Elizabeth presided over a grand royal household of 250 people, costing a staggering 250,000 livres annually. Her residences included the Palais Royal in Paris and several illustrious chateaux, including Versailles. Yet, despite these luxurious surroundings, she and Felipe were often bound to the royal court, forced to partake in the endless round of festivities, ceremonies, and amusements that defined court life. When she could retreat to her sanctuary of her apartments, she would immerse herself in the books of her extensive library, tend to her collections of coins, precious stones, and seals, and dote on her cocker spaniels. She also enjoyed playing the guitar, but her truest joy came from writing letters, her greatest passion, which connected her to the wider world and allowed her to express her innermost thoughts. Elizabeth's letters offer vivid, candid descriptions of both the grand events and the quieter moments of her life, seamlessly blending urgent news with everyday observations. They provide a fascinating window into the opulent world of the French court and the private realm behind its glittering facade. Her writing is refreshingly free from artificial formality and flowery language. Instead, she speaks with blunt honesty, often lacing her words with critical judgments and biting, self-deprecating irony and sarcasm. Confident that her letters would be destroyed after being read and answered, she treated the correspondence she received with the same indifference. A woman of fierce independence, Elizabeth found herself pushed to the fringes of court society, largely due to her unyielding animosity toward Madame de Maintenon. Once a humble governess to Louis XIV's royal bastards, Maintenon had risen to incredible heights, eventually marrying the king in a morganatic union following the death of Queen Marie-Therese. Grounded and deeply proud of her noble lineage, Elizabeth could not stomach the ascension of a woman who had come from humble beginnings. She derided Maintenon with venomous insults, referring to her as mouse filth gone astray among the peppercorns, an old witch, and old drab. Her fury reached its peak in 1692 when Louis XIV arranged for one of his illegitimate daughters to marry Elizabeth's son. In a fit of rage, Elizabeth publicly slapped her son in front of the royal household, an act of humiliation that expressed her utter contempt for the misalliance. The king's relationship with his sister-in-law deteriorated further following the death of Elizabeth's brother, Charles II, Elector Palatine, who passed without heirs. Louis XIV seized the opportunity to claim the Palatinate, sparking the Palatinate War of Succession, a brutal conflict that ravaged the region for nearly a decade. The French army decimated Heidelberg Castle and other towns, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Elizabeth, devastated by the damage, could not hide her sorrow. "It makes my heart bleed, and they still hold it against me that I'm sad about it," she lamented. The death of Felipe in 1701 left Elizabeth in a precarious financial position, saddled with enormous debt. She was now entirely dependent on the king's mercy. Despite the hardships, she continued to hold him in high regard, understanding that she needed to reconcile with Madame de Maintenon to secure both his royal favor and her own financial stability. This delicate reconciliation was achieved, but while the king's disposition toward her became warmer, he continued to keep her at a distance, meeting with her only during formal occasions. It was in the twilight years of his reign that Louis XIV reopened the doors to his inner circle, granting her free access to his private quarters, the revered Holy of Holies. In these final years, the issue of succession became a central topic of the conversations. The royal line, once seemingly unbreakable, began to crumble with the death of the Grand Dauphin in 1711, followed closely by the deaths of the Petit Dauphin and his eldest son. When Louis XIV passed away in 1715, the throne passed to his 5-year-old grandson, Louis XV. As the young king was still a minor, Elizabeth's son, Felipe II de Bourbon, Duke of Orléans, assumed the role of regent, a position he would hold until 1723. This period would become known as the Regency. Elizabeth, the mother of the regent and the central figure at court until her death, maintained a close relationship with her son in later years. However, as sickness and infirmity began to take their toll, her life became increasingly dominated by health struggles. Following the dissolution of the court by Louis XIV's orders, Elizabeth spent much of her final years at the Château St. Cloud, where she passed away on the 8th of December, 1722, at the age of 70. Her lasting legacy is secured through her remarkable letters, which offer a profound glimpse into her complex character and serve as a unique autobiographical chronicle of the French court during Louis XIV's reign of the Renaissance. Although only 10% of her correspondence has survived, the collection remains both extensive and historically significant. Regrettably, it has been published in fragments, and often heavily edited, with a complete, unified edition still absent more than 300 years later. Astonishingly, Elizabeth's letters are considered among the most well-known German-language texts of the Baroque period. Elisabeth-Charlotte, Duchess of Orléans, may have lived much of her life in the shadow of political intrigue and royal expectations, but it is her unflinching spirit and vast correspondence that immortalize her in history. Her letters, rich in personal detail and bold in their honesty, offer a unique and invaluable perspective on the court of Louis XIV and the complexities of European diplomacy. Through her writings, she transcends the limitations of her time, revealing a woman who, though bound by duty and circumstance, never lost her voice or sense of self. Today, more than 300 years after her death, her letters continue to serve as a testament to her intelligence, resilience, and the complexities of life lived at the crossroads of personal struggle and political power. Despite the challenges she faced, Elizabeth's legacy endures, not only as a royal consort, but as a woman whose word continues to resonate through the ages. And that concludes another episode of the Tudors Dynasty podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you love the show and would like to show your support, consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tudors Dynasty. Over there, you'll get commercial-free episodes, early access, and some patron-exclusive content as well. If you would prefer to show your support in another way, head on over to my website, tudorsdynasty.com, and click on the shop to see some of the new merchandise that I have available. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.
The Tudors Dynasty Podcast.